in the future.
There are no people.
There are no people in the future.
No people at all.
There are no people in the future.
Where did all my people go?
There are no people in the future.
Let me try my people call. Where are all my people? Where are all my people? I guess I'll fly away now.
Hey, everybody. Whoa, can you believe it? It is Monday, January 3rd, 2022. Happy New Year. I don't know if I should be saying that with an exclamation point or if I should be saying it with a question mark. I don't know at this point, but regardless, welcome to another year of Out to Coop Podcast, Raging Chicken's Out to Coop Podcast. This is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. On Out to Coop Live, we talk to progressives, activists, and troublemakers of all sorts, right from our own backyard and from across the country. On Fridays, of course, and this will be this Friday will be our first Friday show of the new year. Sean Kitchen and I will be breaking down the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics. And Wednesday this week, I believe, Cyril and I will be back again. So I'm thrilled about that. Hey, Emily, welcome. Happy New Year, Emily. Emily is always great. I always know like this show has officially started when Emily has joined. So happy New Year, Emily. So hopefully the Wednesday show with Cyril Michaleko will be back this week. Cyril, of course, is a progressive columnist for the Bucks County Courier-Times, the Intelligencer. He joins me to drill down into Bucks County, Pennsylvania, international politics. And you can get all our shows by subscribing to our podcast on Podbeans, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can help support this show by becoming a patron for as little as $5 a month. Just head on over to patreon.com/rcpress and you become a patron for as little as $5 a month. Tell your friends. You say we're looking to kind of burn a little hole in their pocket in the new year. Have them shoot us a membership over at patreon.com/rcpress for as little as $5 a month. You can also help out the show by heading on over to our YouTube page if you're not there already. Smash that subscribe button, like the stream for the show, and hit that notification bell every time we go live. You can also join our Discord server, which we're going to try doing a bunch more in the new year with. Fingers crossed on that one. And for more PA progressive talk, you can tune into Rick Smith Show's live stream, 9 p.m. Eastern every night. Head on over to his podcast, subscribe to the Rick Smith Show podcast. But look, best thing you can do at this point is head on over to the ricksmithshow.com and for the latest across all his platforms. We know he's getting a daily show up and running. I'm not sure if it's up and running now. A daily show that is going to be broadcast nationwide in addition to his regular show. I mean, it's like just amazing stuff happening over the Rick Smith Show. You look for the best in kind of like, the voice of the working class right here. Rick Smith Shows, you got to check them out. Go to the ricksmithshow.com for all the latest. And you got to check out the Sisters of the Night Caucus podcast, if you haven't already. The amazing PA women stirring the political cauldron behind this podcast rock the house. And they know where the bodies are buried. Make sure to follow them on Twitter at the Night Caucus and subscribe to their podcast on Anchor, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get their podcast. Attention gamers. Yes, the Game Inn, that's with two N's. The Game Inn is a Quakertown-based black family-owned gaming store. They're friends of the show, and they've got everything from Retro N64s, the latest consoles, video games for all platforms. And look, Funko Pops, action figures, you just got to check them out. Check them out on their Facebook page at The Game Inn. Follow them on Twitter at The Game Inn. Got a question about a game, looking for something hard to get? Shoot them an email or drop them an email. Shoot them a message or drop them an email at thegameinpa@gmail.com. A special shout out goes to, once again, as always, to Jonathan Mann, who wrote our intro song, There Are No People in the Future. Check out all his great stuff on his YouTube page and follow him on Twitter at @SongAdayMan. That's at @SongAdayMan on Twitter. Well, welcome everybody. On today's show, well, I wasn't sure what we're going to do for today's show. I wasn't sure if there was going to be a today's show. But you know what? I decided, it's the new year. I can't not be here. And I started, sitting there and thinking yeah, you know what? I'm just going to drop in and see how everybody's doing tonight and start off the new year right. The reason why I wasn't sure if we're going to do a show today was because it is, of course, not only is it the new year, right? But it was the first day back to school for my kids, and not just my kids, but kids across Pennsylvania, across the country, really. And it's pretty crazy out there. I don't know what it's like in your neck of the woods, but here in Bucks County, PA, where you have masks optional schools, you have COVID running rampant. I got to say, is that in my kind of circle of friends and kind of extended circle of friends, like my neighbors, my kids, like friends, parents, and that kind of stuff, people you're kind of interacting with on a relative basis, all throughout the first wave of COVID and all throughout the Delta wave of COVID, we've all remained, for I won't say all of everybody, but have remained COVID free, right? And have been doing the right thing. We getting the vaccines, have been masking up and all that stuff. My kids have gone to school and they wear masks, most of the time. There's a couple times I know that my kids have said, oh, I had my mask off for a little bit while today and they were nervous about it. But, we talk about it. We talk about it openly. It's not like a shame thing. It's about like, how do we best protect ourselves and all this kind of stuff. And they're kind of nervous about COVID too as well. But this latest wave, this Omicron variant, I have not known so many people who've had COVID as I do right now. It's really incredible. Right. And these are people, like, for the most part, who have been doing the right thing. There's a couple people I know that didn't get the booster yet. I've had some like family members, some who have had the booster, some who have not had the booster. These are like on my in-laws' side, on my side of the family, and you find out people are just getting COVID. Most of them, at least the people that I'm in direct contact with, have had the vaccine. So they're not, in the hospital at this point. But some of them, we're still waiting to get the booster or just hadn't gotten around to it yet. Usually it was just kind of things got busy and that kind of thing. You know how it is. And now they've, got COVID, or their kids have got COVID, or their brothers and sisters have got COVID, whatever it might be. And, we're in a school district where masks are optional. So we don't know what to do. We don't know kind of what's going to do here. And Emily just kind of jumped in. Her husband was supposed to get the booster on 12/28, but got COVID instead. I mean, there you go. And, and we're talking about people who have been extraordinarily responsible throughout the whole, this whole epidemic. And this Omicron variant is so incredibly transmissible, right? Now, the thing is, right, yes, it's true. As we hear about this, is that it is proven to be, or it is proving, let me put it like that. I don't mean to say this is the studies show. That's not what I'm saying here. But as we've been told, it's proving to be less severe for people who have been vaccinated than Delta, certainly. Sorry, that's not COVID. I'm hoping that's just, I got a little something stuck in my throat. It's proving less severe in terms of like hospitalizations and things like that, but a lot of that is due to the number of people who've gotten who've been vaccinated and boosted, who have been doing the things like wearing masks and so on. But the sheer numbers are it's unbelievable, right? I mean, the numbers are just off the freaking charts, right? And I was going to go and kind of look this up at this point. Let's see how many came in today. Live COVID updates. The Omicron spread is crazy. I mean, it's like what? I mean, if you look at, you look at these numbers, and they're just, we just see it just shoot up in December. I mean, straight up. I mean, you're talking about like more than I don't know, 300 cases per 100,000 per day, all upwards of 400,000, 400, it's looking like. I don't have the exact numbers for today. Here you go. New cases, average on January 2nd, which was yesterday. New cases, 1 day cases, 405,470 cases of COVID. That is plus 204% over, that's the 14-day change. Right. That's just crazy. And if you look at the maps that, on New York Times tracks the daily COVID stuff, it's all, the United States is especially the Northeast is just like dark red and purple, meaning that, we're in the extreme cases. And it's just, it's going to make its way across the country just like everything else. And, of course, part of the concern we have as parents is that we're seeing hospitalization of kids in higher rates than ever before. And I got to say, some of the news reporting on this has been really frustrating to me, because I was determined tonight when I came on tonight to just try to launch into this detailed media critique of the way that COVID is being discussed, but and I'm still not going to do that. But it just needed to say I listened to, say, for example, New York Times, the daily podcast. I listened to it this morning because they had this morning because they had it was focused on COVID, and there seems to be such this push to want to not talk about how bad this is and wanting to look for the silver linings. They use that language all the time. I mean, I heard on NPR this morning, they talk about silver linings. I listened to the New York Times podcast, and they're talking the science of COVID, the silver linings. You see all the silver linings. People want to look for the bright part, right? Well, there's not as many old people. Because a lot of old people have been vaccinated. The reason why that we have so many kids that are in are going into the hospital now is because you have fewer kids. You have fewer kids that are vaccinated, right? I mean, it's simple. Plus, you have the loosening up of mask requirements and social distancing and all this kind of stuff happening in schools. So this is the broad-based experiment, right? We're going to see more. It's just the way it's going to be, and I think that we've settled on that, I guess. And I put up this, I posted this thing yesterday. It's like I was just like, we're in a really damaged society. I mean, culturally, socially, we're in a really damaged society that. We're approaching, like, I forget where exactly the death number is today, but we're approaching 900,000 people dying from COVID in this country alone. And the projections are that we're going to see over 1 million because, yes, it is true that while this Omicron variant is super transmissible and super contagious, it's not the highest rates of hospitalization. But once you start doing the math, you start realizing, like, okay, well, instead of, whatever, I'm just going to make up numbers here. Instead of 10% of the people getting hospitalized, you're going to have 2% of the people getting hospitalized, right? Okay, that's fine. But if you're talking about something that is like 5 times more transmissible or 7 times or 8 times more transmissible, that means the sheer numbers of people that are contracting COVID, right, is going to push those hospitalization numbers up just by the number of people, right? So if you have, 1 out of every 20 people, or, 1 out of every 20 people getting hospitalized, let's say you have 1 every 100 person, 1 out of every 20 people that gets hospitalized with Delta, right? But it's not that transmissible. But you have 1 every 100 that gets hospitalized with Omicron, right? So, okay, that's better. But if you have a significant number of people, right? So instead of, say, 20 people getting COVID today, you got 100 people, you're still 1-to-1, right? You see what I'm saying? If more people are getting it, you're still going to get it. So the numbers are going to go up, right? And that's kind of the projections. And right now is that you were seeing the Northeast get hit really hard, which happens to have higher rates of vaccination than some other areas of the country. So then you got to wonder what's going to happen when this runs rampant throughout those areas of the country who are just starting to really, hasn't peaked yet, but it's kind of starting to ramp up. When it hits those areas where you have all the kind of, hardcore COVID deniers and anti-vaxxers and all that kind of stuff, Trump land, basically, what happens to those folks? What happens to hospitalization rates at that point? And sure, okay, I'm going to go ahead with this. So there was that kind of stuff, and I don't mean to start on such a kind of downer here, but this is going to be one of the things that I think we're going to have to reckon with for a long period of time. And I've been thinking a lot about this over, our kind of holiday break, as it were. Is here in Raging Chicken and Out the Coop podcast is we're focused on the fight, right? I mean, we're focused on what's happening politically. We're focused what's happening at the state and the national level. We're looking at organizations that are kind of fighting for a better world, all that kind of stuff, right? And so you're in the kind of, I always think about it as our goal to say, we want to focus on the fight, right? The hand-to-hand combat, if you will, but then provide some kind of context, right? Put it in some kind of context and then talking about trajectories, right? And thinking about how we think about this stuff and how we should kind of understand what's going on, right? And to highlight those things that we think are not getting highlighted enough, right? That kind of stuff. This stuff, what's happened during COVID is it's kind of a little bit of a different order, right? Because we're talking about the erosion of a social fabric, right? That where 850, 900,000 people is an acceptable loss, right? I mean, that's just really remarkable, right? I mean, we just kind of like, it's those kind of things you ask yourself. The question is like, well, what would I do, or what would would the United States, right? I can think of like 5 years ago, would it be acceptable in the United States? Would it be acceptable to just let 900,000 people die? Some people would be like, yeah, but most people are like, no, that would be, oh my God, we wouldn't be acceptable. We wouldn't accept that bargain. Well, we have, right? We have. And I know I'm using like the imperial we there, like I know that there's tons of folks out there kind of like trying our darndest to try to stop this, to try to fight back, to try to raise awareness, to try to organize and all this kind of stuff. But there's this piece in the New Republic by Melody Schreiber that says America quits the fight against COVID, and I'll just kind of, well, no, I'm not going to read it. I'm not going to read. I read it earlier, and I'm not going to go read it out loud to you. Brian says, and there's longer COVID on top of the infections, to which my knowledge there isn't a lot of research on info on. Exactly. So the long COVID stuff, and this is what I worry about with my kids, especially, right? So even once you have, I do know some people who've got COVID a while back and still are not kind of 100% yet. Still have the fatigue, still have kind of a bunch of other symptoms, have dizziness, have losing balance, a whole bunch of stuff like this, right? What's going to be that long-term impact? I don't know. I don't think any of us know right now. There's exactly as Brian said, there hasn't been a lot of research on that. There's research going on. There's research studying it, but long means long, right? Long COVID means the symptoms and some of the effects and of getting COVID, what the long-term impact is, we're not that far out yet, so we don't know, right? So there's that. But one of the things that you saw the CDC, this is like when I realized that we've given up. I mean, this is when, and then I saw this piece by Melody Schreiber saying, America quits the fight against COVID. When you saw these new CDC guidelines come out, that's basically said, we're going to cut the quarantine. If you get COVID, you're going to cut the quarantine period from 10 days until 5 days, right? And with the caveat that if you're infected, and then you're going to quarantine for 5 days, and then you're okay to go back to work after that 5th day, as long as you wear a tight fitting mask. Right? That's kind of what they're saying. But we're not going to test to see if you're still shedding or still contagious. Right? We're not going to require the test, and you can go back to work. Right? And Chris Hayes had Anthony Fauci on the other night, and he asked him versions of some of the questions that went through my mind immediately when I saw that. It's like, well, what's actually driving this decision, right? And like, Fauci basically came out and said, it's like, well, we have to balance a couple things. We don't want our society shutting down, and the people, these people got to go to work, and we need to still keep our economy running. And you read between the lines, and it's basically saying like, well, we've got a lot of people from the business community, and some reporting's been coming out about this now. We've got people from the business community who've basically been saying, like, we can't afford to shut down. Like, for example, we can't afford to stop the airlines, right? We need to basically get our flight attendants back in there. We can't afford to have them out for 10 days, right? Yes, exactly. Capitalism, a death cult. And now they're actually got the high priestesses of the Republican Party, priests and priestesses of the Republican Party, right, that are leading that death cult, right? And you've got kind of like, I don't know what you would call the Democrats in this context, but I don't know, just kind of your daily priests, right? I don't know, if we put this cult, because it's like, the Democrats have, want to tackle COVID, right? And Biden says he wants to come in and tackle COVID. When it came around down to it, is like they didn't even have the stomach for it, right? They didn't have the stomach for what it would take, like we see happening in some other countries, right? And when, Fauci was asked about the testing, well, why isn't it that you are not having, why is it that you're not requiring a test? It's like, well, because, the effectiveness of the tests, studies are beginning to show that the effectiveness of the tests starts to wane after about the 5th day, because you're not shedding as much virus. So you're going to have, but you read between the lines there, and what is the deal, right? The effectiveness declines. It doesn't go to 0, right? So yes, there's still going to be a risk, but if you test, you're going to catch some, right? There's an attempt at least to try to be safe and try to stop the virus. And then Chris Hayes asked him, Fauci, that question is, what is this actually based on? Is this based on, what's the science behind this? And Fauci was like, well, it was a judgment call. It wasn't based upon the science. It was based upon all this other stuff. It was based upon business, about, as Brian says, capitalism, the death cult of capitalism, right? That's what we got going on. And so I was like, wow, this is really it, right? So we're just giving up. We're throwing in the towel. And like I said, you got Melody Schreiber coming in, basically, giving us the blow by blow. We're throwing in the towel. We're just going to we're going to go with it. And we're going to pretend it's okay. And I'll tell you, as a parent, as an individual, as, I'm going back to work soon too. And like, I was saying this to my brother-in-law the other day. I said, I can't even say I'm anxious about it. I'm just like at the point where I'm like, what else can you do? I mean, other than the best, you got vaccinated, got boosted, I wear a mask, when I go in public places. We encourage our kids to do the right thing. But when you've got an entire community that it doesn't care, right? I mean, I live in an area where people haven't cared for a long time. I've mentioned this on the show. I go to my local supermarket, right? Not just now, but I'm even right in the middle of Delta. You're lucky if maybe 1/10 of the people there have masks on. They don't care. We're in Trump country here, right? Some people are just exhausted, but they just don't care. And they're like, well, I'm not worried about myself. But what about everybody else? Look, I don't care. I don't care. And, I hate being like a defeatist in that, but, it's pretty crazy. Emily just said, yes, and I knew they weren't committed to fighting this COVID when Jen Psaki smirked at Mara Eliason during the press conference when she's asked about free tests for everyone. As if you remember that, Mara Eliason was basically saying, you know what, like, what about the UK and some other countries where they have the free test? And she's like, and Jen Psaki's like, what are you, we're going to like mail everybody a free test? I'm like, well, yeah. She's like, yeah, come on. Right. Then a few days later, of course, Biden comes along. Oh, we're thinking about getting everybody tests. But it was clear that it was just like, it wasn't a plan because they didn't have it set to go. It wasn't ready to go. It was going to be weeks before they could actually even pull that off. And by then, you're talking about the Omicron variant, peaking and going beyond. So, what are you going to do? Same thing as, at least I would say at my university, we were going to have, as we go back, they're still requiring masks coming in the fall, but they're not requiring tests or anything like that. One of the things that they say that one of the issues was with the tests was not that what Fauci was saying about, them, not being as effective and all that. That's true, right? Everything I've read about it to try to, fact check that seems to be accurate. But the real reason was there's no tests available. There's not enough available. We didn't produce them enough. Remember that whole thing that everyone was trying to encourage Trump to kind of, use the war times power to produce this stuff like this, and Biden's going, we're going to come in, we're going to do this. Yeah, guess what? Nope. They did for a short period of time, but they don't have the stomach to take on capitalism. All right. We don't want too much testing because then we'll know how many cases we actually have. And then we'll be able to attribute those deaths and those hospitalizations to the actual cause. Right? Crazy. So that's kind of like, how our new year's starting in some ways, right? We also, the other thing that is kind of big, just the other great piece that I don't know if people saw this. This came out on December 29th. It was an AP story. It got some decent coverage. It's called Slow Motion Insurrection, how GOP seizes election power. And this is kind of this, right, this piece right here. This came from the AP. It was published all over the country. And it really is an excellent piece of reporting on what's going on with American democracy. Right? Basically saying that, look, that we're all set up for it once again. We're set up for this, and we're in 2022 now, which you know what that means. It is an election year. This is the year that the Democrats are poised to lose the House and potentially the Senate. Frankly, I'll say at this point, I see it going to be a very, very difficult year for Democrats to hold on to the House. I don't see it happening, but I could be wrong. That's where I'm at right now. The Senate, it's going to be really tight. You've got the majority report earlier today. They just did a rundown of the Senate races. Just say, here's the ones you got to watch. There's 10 of them. So check that out. I should have written them down, but I didn't. But Pennsylvania, of course, is one of them because, you got Toomey who's retiring, and you've got, that seat's going to be up for grabs, and we're going to see. We're going to see what happens there. There's Democratic senators who are defending their seats. There's Republicans who are coming in. There's open seats. So it's going to be all over the map. I know Ohio's another one of them for Brian out there. So that's kind of where we're at. And, it's going to be an interesting year. You top that off. So you've got this, you've got this really concrete way, this very methodical kind of legal agenda, right? Legislative agenda, I should say, by the GOP in states, right? Kind of across the country in the states, right? Through basically the changing of election laws, changing over who gets to count the votes, changing over who has the right to send forward electors. All that kind of stuff is going on right now in the states. And that's that slow motion insurrection that Nicholas Riccardi wrote about for the AP. And then you've got this report. This just was all over the news this morning. And even yesterday, you heard some stuff about this. This was on this new report that came out, or this new, say, poll or whatever, the NPR Ipsos poll, that finds out that 64% of Americans believe that U.S. democracy is in crisis and at risk of failing. Right? Now, I know you have people who sit in my seat, like people like me and people who have been kind of doing this kind of work for a while, been kind of saying, like, you know, trying to sound as best we can, sound the alarm bells about how important it is that, you know, we pay attention to what's going on, because these people are not going away. They're doing their best to have this, you know, as Riccardi says, slow motion insurrection. But what's remarkable about this poll, right, is that the people who are most clearly convinced and mobilized about the crisis of U.S. democracy are not Democrats, are not those on the left, but Republicans. Right? This is the kind of the follow-up of the big lie, right? This is that next step from there that they've convinced, right? They are convinced. A majority of Republicans are convinced that American democracy is a fail. So let me just read you this piece from NPR for just a quick thing. So an NPR Ipsos poll finds that 64% of Americans believe U.S. democracy is in crisis and at risk of failing. That sentiment is felt most acutely by Republicans. 2/3 of GOP respondents agree with the verifiably false claim that, quote, voter fraud helped Joe Biden win the 2020 election, unquote. And that is a key pillar of the big lie that the election was stolen from former President Donald Trump. So 2/3 of GOP respondents believe that voter fraud is what put Joe Biden in there, that Joe Biden is an illegitimate president. That is not 2/3 of extremists. That is 2/3 of Republicans. That's crazy. Fewer than half of Republicans say they are willing to accept the results of the 2020 election, a number that has remained virtually unchanged since we asked the same question in January. So fewer than half of Republicans say they are willing to accept the results. So that means less than half of Republicans say they're willing to accept the results of the 2020 election. Republicans, not right-wing extremist QAnon believers, but Republicans. Okay? Quote, there is really a sort of dual reality through which partisans are approaching not only what happened a year ago on January 6th, but also generally with our presidential elections and our democracy, unquote, said Mallory Newell, vice president of Ipsos, which conducted the poll. Quote, it is Republicans that are driving this belief that there was major fraudulent voting and it changed the results of the election, Newell said. Nearly 2/3 of the poll respondents agree that U.S. democracy is more at risk now, or more now than it was a year ago. Among Republicans, that number climbs to 4 in 5. 4 out of 5 Republicans, 80% of Republicans believe that it is at more at risk now for voter fraud and everything else. Overall, 70% of poll respondents agree that the country is in crisis and at risk of failing. That's where we're at, right? Seriously, that's where we're at. We are at the point where 70% of Americans believe or at least people polled, Democrats and Republicans believe that that the American democracy is at risk of failing. There's also clear divisions over, how people talk about what happened on January 6th, whether it was an insurrection, whether it was a riot, whether what might be goes on. And here's the other one I was looking for. Now, while a majority of Americans at this point still rule out political violence, right, but a minority does not. So here it is, quote, the poll also found that a majority of Republicans and Democrats alike reject political violence. Thank God for that, at least at this point. Quote, in a way, it is reassuring to see that the system hasn't totally broken down, as they say, right? But that's whatever. But more than 1 in 5 poll respondents say that violence is sometimes justified, either to protect democracy or American culture and values. Right? Republicans were slightly more likely than Democrats to agree that, quote, it is okay to engage in violence to protect American democracy. 32% of Trump voters agreed compared to 22% of Biden voters. So you've got this around 20% 25% kind of itch it up there, basically saying that, no, you know what? Violence is going to be okay. This is deeply distressing. And it's like, there's moments like these, which I'm like, man, you know, I got into higher education because I thought how important, say, critical analysis was and how critical consciousness was and how important it was here. And holy cow, is that been inadequate? I mean, it's an indictment of so much, right? About our media infrastructure, about our educational system, how we go about kind of training people to be kind of democratic citizenship, that this is where we're at. And of course, what happens when we believe that we don't need to fight, that we just kind of can pretend that everything is going to be bipartisan, and that we have one political party, the Democrats, who refuse to fight for the advancement of a particular agenda. Instead, try to be everything to everybody. While the other party, the Republicans, just care about sheer power and are willing to do whatever the hell it takes in order to get it. 2022. Oh boy. So that's kind of where I'm at. But here's the fun stuff, however. What I have here tonight, I want to show you. So this is what has got me through, in part. This is only coffee in here tonight, but I just want to show this. This is a thank you to my brother Ryan, who got me the Dungeon Run coffee mug, which has given me 24 ounces of sheer caffeinated pleasure. So there's that. There's you had a decent holiday, kind of a slow holiday. Spent most of it with the immediate family. We did go up to see my folks. This is the other thing that was kind of really remarkable to see is, you know, my folks live in New York, and when we left here, there was this rating that was kind of coming out. One of these apps I have on my phone where I'm saying, you know, what's your kind of risk level and for COVID and all this kind of stuff. And like Bucks County, where I'm at, and the surrounding counties, Montgomery County, Burke County, Lehigh, Northampton, they were in the kind of like 90, 91, 93, 95% kind of risk, like high risk, you know, of contracting COVID. Whereas up in New York State, up in Utica, New York, it was 70%. Right. So the risk was lower. And when we went up there, and we really didn't go very many places, but you drove by places. A couple stopped in a drugstore at one point to see if they had any kind of COVID test. We ordered out food once, went in to pick it up, right, with mask on. And I had to say, you look around there, everybody had masks on, right? Stopped and got gas, everybody had masks on. On the way back, right, we stopped at one place. I don't remember what it was, but we had to. We drove by some place. Everybody had masks on, and then we had to stop for gas at one point, which is kind of in the southern tier of New York, in a much more rural area, much more kind of Trump heavy area. Stopped. There was a little convenience store and a gas station there before you hit down kind of Route 8 where it hits up 80, whatever it is. But anyways, you go there, very rural by Sydney, New York, and you go in there, and you know, probably 2/3 of the people had their masks on in there, but there were some people that were kind of going in, right, you know, in and out with no mask on. We crossed the border. We started talking about, so you know what, you know, these cases are going up, and we can't find COVID tests anywhere. So we should maybe if we could stop someplace on the way to see if we can pick some up. So we saw CVS or Rite Aid, I don't remember what it was, in God, I'm spacing the name of it, but it's like kind of just north of Scranton, right? Okay, look, it's on the way, it's right off here. We're just kind of pop off the exit, stop it in there, walked in there, and that was on the Pennsylvania side of the border. So we go into Pennsylvania, go into the CVS. It was a CVS, now it's coming back, and we walk in there. Or I walk in there with my mask on to get there. I am the only one with a mask. And so I'm like, man, there you go. There's a difference between what happens when you have a state that is kind of legislating and is kind of like encouraging and mandating masks and kind of vaccination and things like this, in a state that doesn't. Right? You could see the downstream consequences of that. It's pretty crazy. So we came back, and luckily we came back, and it was a couple of my neighbors with COVID. Again, people had done all the right things. After a couple days, we were able to track down some COVID tests. So now we got a stock of COVID tests in our house. And here we go. There's more stories I could tell, but I don't want to tell them. Because I don't want to get anything that might, I don't know, identify anybody, you know what I mean? So anyways, what's going on with you all? I hate to put it like that, but it's I'm I don't know where we're going. So the good news is, like I said at the beginning of the show, the good news is, I guess, that hopefully Cyril and I are going to get back into the show kind of more consistent basis now again. I've had some chance to kind of think about kind of some updates. I've been playing around with some new graphics. I've been we're working on updating the web page. I've got some conversations kind of that I'm going to be having with some people in this coming kind of couple of weeks before I have to go to back to campus. About looking kind of restarting some of the writing that we've been doing that we used to do kind of quite a bit at, or almost exclusively for Raging Chicken. Get some more folks that are writing in, kind of getting that webpage active again, and bring you to some more content on our Patreon page too. For those of you who are patrons, you'll know that we had I did like 1 or 2 special shows. Emily, thank you for saying that. Emily said, been thinking about your friend Steve and hope he's okay. If you remember Steve Oros, who was he's the guy who had the heart transplant, and then Kutztown was basically screwing over and trying to basically force him back to work when he was like significantly, he was the most at risk you could be for COVID. The one thing I believe I mentioned this on the show, one of the shows before we went to break. Was he won an initial court ruling that basically stayed Kutztown University's decision to kind of basically get rid of him for the spring semester, and basically prevented his firing, which is a good thing. Now there's a long road ahead, right? But that was a major victory on Steve's part to basically make sure that he wasn't going to lose his health insurance now, and that they were going to kind of kick him to the curb because they wouldn't give him an ADA accommodation. So that's good news. But reached out to Steve. We've been talking a little bit about some of the ways that maybe we can kind of return to this. Invited him back to come back on the podcast, but he's involved with a legal case right now, so that's going to be up to a determination that he and his lawyers are going to have to make. But I would love to have him back on this as a part of way of kind of documenting this story, because look, Steve's story is something that's personal and close to me, but his story, as he himself has said on this show, and he said to anybody who listened, his story is not just his story, right? That he's fighting this fight. He knows that there is hundreds and thousands of workers that are dealing with the same different versions of the same problem at their workplaces. Right. And so, it's like, all kudos to him for kind of basically willing to take up that fight and basically saying, yeah, look, he's willing to fight it. Knows that everybody can't, everybody, can or won't, or too concerned or whatever it might be. But he's going to do this. So this is a good thing. So hopefully we're going to have him back on the show if he can make it work out with his lawyers and his court cases and things like this, because I'd like to give folks an update of where things are on this show too as well. So we've got that. So we, like to do some more of that kind of stuff. And like I put out a couple kind of short shows that were patrons only shows. We're going to do some more of those. They're going to be patrons only content. They'll be kind of shorter little blips here, maybe kind of different reads of things in the media, single article stuff. Just as a way to kind of saying thank you for all those folks who are stepping up to kind of help support this show over at patreon.com/rcpress. And some of those shows that we do on Patreon, Patreon will be Patreon exclusives. They'll always remain just Patreon stuff. Some of those things we will, eventually kind of release for public a little bit later, so people get a first crack at it. Our patrons get to see it exclusively first before it goes public, like in weeks afterwards or something like that. So that's cool. but I hope everybody here is doing okay. Like I said, we almost didn't go tonight, just because I didn't know what was going to happen with what the school day was going to look like, what the after effects were going to be, what my own mental health state was going to be in after this day. But things are relatively stable at this point, which is good. So I would definitely wanted to just come on and just wish Happy New Year to everybody, and thank everybody for all the support. And it's great to see Emily and Brian jumping on tonight. Great to see folks. And I'll be letting you know, we're going to be returning. We had a list of people that we were going to have as guests that we're lining up, and we ran into a bunch of kind of scheduling stuff. So those folks still want to come back on those. So we're looking, we're going to reach back up to them. We basically left it. So, okay, look, we'll see. We'll come back in the new year and see if we can reschedule them. We got some stuff on climate. Some climate change stuff that we want to be. We have some folks that are coming on. We've got some labor folks that we want to have back on. We're going to do some stuff on education. We're going to do more on that. We're going to follow what's happening on the Bucks County. Obviously, all the school boards and school districts and stuff like that. We're going to see the political races that are going to start kind of heating up, and so we might have some of these candidates on there too as well. There's the high profile ones, which you already know at the Senate and the House and things like this. We got also local races and some state house races that we might have some folks on to give some exposure to. We got, like, for example, well, I'll tell you that by the days to come. I don't want to just kind of run possibilities out in front of everybody, but there's some good folks that are running, that are stepping up to run for state houses, for state Senate, in addition to, the big chairs in DC. So that's what I got for tonight, everybody. And I'm hoping that you are well, that your families are okay. Emily, I wish your best to your husband. I hope he's doing okay. And thank goodness that, he was vaccinated at least. I just hope he's doing all right. I hope those you with kids are hanging in there too as well, both kind of emotionally and mentally, and that your kids are going to be okay in their schools. I know there's been a lot of teachers and administrators who've been absent because they've gotten COVID over the holiday season. And I hope that we're going to find some spaces for joy in this year too as well, some joy and thankfulness and care that I think that all of us could use after. Man, it's been like a nonstop onslaught for the past, it seems like 5 years. So I'm looking forward to kind of to that space wherever it may come. So and in the meantime is that the other thing I should tell everybody too as well, I mentioned this before break. I did start some more D&D games with my kids, which was fun. I've been toying around a little bit with getting a D&D game going with some kind of regular adults too as well, which would be fun. But my hesitation has always been I don't know where I'm going to find the time, right? So there's that. But that's been a lot of fun, and that was a little nice distraction. With that, this Friday we'll probably talk a little bit about some TV shows I've been watching. I don't know if anybody has watched Station 11 at all. I just watched the first episode of that, loved it. I watched the new season of The Witcher, watched the full season of what do you call it, The Wheel of Time. I've got a couple other ones here in the in the hopper to watch, like Foundation's another one. I've been keep on saying I want to watch this, and I haven't had a chance yet. But hopefully before I have to go back to campus, I'll be able to pick up on some of those. So we'll probably talk a little about that on Friday. Sean and I will catch up on what kind of latest news out. There's a lot happening in Pennsylvania, so please do tune in on Friday, like right around the 10:45, 11 ish area. I wish we could nail that time down a little bit more, but Sean's got a call. He's on in the morning, and that's it. Sometimes it goes long, sometimes it's short. So we could never just pin down the exact time. But in that 10:45, 11 o'clock quarter of the clock time thing. So wishing you all kind of a happy 2022, a happy new year. We'll wish for the best weekend ahead. We'll keep up the fight, keep the struggles, support each other, and I look forward to kind of another year, kind of sitting in this chair, kind of growing our community, learning more about you all, and kind of what you're facing in your neck of the woods, and let's be here for each other, huh? So anyways, we're going to go out on this one, and I'm going to go back up and spend some time with my kids and getting ready for bed. We're trying to do early bedtimes this week. Make sure I got those, all the energy that they need to fight off that stuff. So anyways, this is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. I want to remind you can help support this show by heading over to patreon.com/rcpress. I wish you all the best, and look forward to, another year doing this stuff. Here we go. All right, everybody. It's Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. I'm out of here. See ya.